Hello, my name is Cora Howe. I'm delighted to present my research as part of the FOE conference this year. My research is entitled An Exploration of an Individualized Self-Regulation Program using the Stress Self-Regulation and Communication Framework for Autistic Children. This research is supervised by Claire Griffin and it is part of my Master's by Research degree from Mary Immaculate College, Ireland. I'm now going to provide a brief overview of this presentation. The presentation will start with my own research positionality before moving on to the neurodivergent lens that frames this research. I will then look more closely at autism and self-regulation and present the findings from my systematic literature review. I will end this presentation with a brief overview of the current research study and the expected impact of this research. So this research draws on my own experience as a primary school teacher working in an autism class in Ireland. However, it also goes back prior to my teaching to where I started my initial teacher training in Mary Immaculate College and I completed a Bachelor in Education and Psychology. During this degree, I developed a passion for inclusive education and also an interest in studying autism and helping to develop inclusive interventions and research practices for autistic children. So since I finished my degree, I've been working as a primary school teacher in a special education role in a large urban school in Ireland. And I've been working in an autism class for the past 3 years. And here I saw firsthand the importance of self-regulation to the everyday life of autistic people, to academic, social, and well-being needs. I also saw how difficult it is to use current interventions, which a lot of them are not accessible to autistic people, especially autistic people who may have communication challenges. So I started a master's degree last year and I wanted to look more closely at how self-regulation develops for autistic children and also explore an individualized self-regulation intervention that can be used for all autistic children and is accessible in schools across Ireland, Europe, and hopefully globally too. This intervention is currently being implemented. I am collecting post-data results at the moment and I will be finishing my master's degree in December 2023. A neurodivergent lens frames this research, and I think it's echoed in Shankar's statement, which says that an understanding of self-regulation helps to create a paradigm shift in thinking about children's emotions and behaviour. I wanted this research to be a way to help to understand children's emotions and also for children to learn about their emotions and from their emotions too, and also to help to frame the dyad of differences which the APA talks about, which is in relation to social communication, restricted interests, and repetitive behaviours. So I wanted this research to be cognizant of those differences and also enable them to help support children's self-regulation and develop inclusive interventions. So looking at the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, this is also a key policy that framed her research. So this document talks about how governments and societies need to remove barriers to enable the full participation of people with special educational needs in society. So this moves beyond academic and social needs alone towards moving towards higher order skills such as the need for self-determination, and self-regulation is key to that because it's a way for children to express and learn their emotions and also to start to be able to, I suppose, enter the social world a little bit more, and also for educators, clinicians, people working with autistic people to help to adapt the environment and enable the social world to become more accessible to them. However, a key question arising from considering the neurodivergent lens is about the diagnosis of autism and maybe how accessible the diagnosis of autism makes it for autistic people to access these key social skills interventions. So the DSM-5 collapsed the subtypes of autism into a single diagnosis of ASD. However, autistic people are still often labelled as having high or low functioning autism. Similarly, the Lancet Commission recently advocated for the use of the term profound autism to identify individuals who have intellectual and/or language difficulties along with a diagnosis of ASD. However, researchers such as CAP, they argue that these labels, they may fail to capture a holistic model of ASD and the ability of autistic people who are nonverbal to advocate for themselves. Similarly, the diagnosis and labeling of autism can limit access to social skills interventions, which are necessary for supporting the lifelong outcomes of autistic people. And I've seen this more and more in my research, in my literature review, and this will be presented in my next few slides too. Now, looking more closely at autism and self-regulation. Self-regulation in itself, it refers to the capacity to cope with stressors and return to homeostasis where the person is calm and alert. In my own research and my own teaching, I've noticed how children, for example, if they're dysregulated from an environmental point of view, or maybe it could be biological, or it could be, for example, just excitement for a birthday party or summer holidays. When you're dysregulation, it's very hard to, for example, concentrate on a task I've given a child, or even just engage in those social interactions. And dysregulation is particularly common for autistic children. So the stress self-regulation communication framework, which is presented here, so this offers a framework to look at how we can support the development of self-regulation for autistic children. And it adopts a neurodevelopmental point of view, and it's also based on these researchers' own work with children who have a diagnosis of autism from their role as speech and language therapists. So it starts with phase 1, which is identifying and co-regulation to reduce stress. So here, parents, teachers, clinicians, they can work with children to help to identify what are these stressors, what is causing dysregulation, and how can we start to reduce it. And the researchers also advocate co-regulation practices, which, for example, might be play-based approaches, and also validating children's emotions, modeling our own emotions too, which is so important. Then it moves on to phase 2, which is scaffolding to support foundational skills. Here, the researchers advocate explicitly teaching emotional literacy and self-regulation language, and programs which are already widely used in schools can be used here, for example, zones of regulation or the alert program. And here we can teach children the language of self-regulation and emotions, which helps them to communicate and express their needs. Next, in phase 3, it moves on to scaffolding to support autonomy. So here it is hoped that children can become more autonomous and create a greater role in their own self-regulation. However, it's also very cognizant that self-regulation develops slowly across childhood, and that this is really a cyclical model, and it's something that can be reinforced year in and year out. And this framework, the stress self-regulation communication framework, this will be used as part of my own intervention, which I will talk about at the end of this presentation. So as I am a primary school teacher working in an autism class, I'm very aware that I might have certain biases, and also I might not be very objective in choosing and using interventions. So I decided to conduct a systematic literature review to create a more objective stance around the widely used self-regulation interventions and looking at the outcomes of self-regulation interventions for autistic children. This literature review was conducted last year between May and July, and the initial search yielded 109 results. However, after a closer look at the studies, a total of 6 studies were appraised in my final literature review. So this included 109 children with a diagnosis of autism, and they range in age from 6 to 16 years old. Interestingly, all of the studies set formal requirements for a diagnosis of autism, for example, by a pediatrician or by a registered psychiatrist. Also, most of the studies set additional requirements for measures of cognitive, intellectual, and linguistic testing scores. In terms of the intervention and results, so 3 of the studies used adapted versions of the secret agent's social skills interventions. For example, one study looked at structured versus unstructured versions of the program. Another study looked at parent involvement, while a final study looked at a fully parent-developed and delivered program. One study focused on robot-enhanced therapy, while another study focused on cognitive behavioural therapy, and Noel and his colleagues focused on combined popular social skills programs to create their intervention. So all of the studies had very positive results, and they all reported improvement in at least one outcome measure. However, there were some mixed findings, for example, in terms of generalizability from one setting to another. Another finding was that structured interventions were more effective than unstructured ones, and also that parental involvement was very positive, but the support was needed, and a fully parental delivered program was quite difficult for parents. In terms of the impact of the studies included in the literature review, one of the primary considerations is the importance of accessible interventions and also the need to adapt interventions to meet the individual needs of pupils. Another important consideration was the importance of structured school-based interventions with parental involvement with the necessary support. However, it's also worth noting that caution should be exerted in drawing conclusions from brief therapies, as autism is a lifelong condition and spontaneous short-term gains can be unlikely. So this systematic literature review, this really added to my study and was the basis for why I chose my research study too. So the results of the study, along with my own research experience, made me want to develop an inclusive research design which can be used for all children. I also drew on the stress, self-regulation and communication framework to provide a three-phased overview for moving from co-regulation towards more independent self-regulation skills. So these came together to create my three-phase framework for school-based intervention with parental involvement. The intervention does not require any formal training, and I created lesson plans which can be used by the class teacher, which include a home learning element and also visuals and adaptations to make it accessible for all children with varying communication and social needs. In terms of my methodology, I've employed an exploratory case study design to enable greater understanding of the individual development of self-regulation. I have adopted a qualitative research position that is pragmatic in nature and is also cognizant of my own subjectivity, which can add to the findings too in terms of thematic analysis at the end of the research. This study is currently ongoing in a special class setting in Ireland, and it includes 6 children who have diagnosis of autism, their parents and their class teacher. I have chosen mixed methods data collection, which includes quantitative measures of self-regulation, along with qualitative measures, which include a sensory audit of the classroom, positive sensory profiles of each child, which come together to create that individualized self-regulation intervention. And I've also conducted semi-structured interviews with parents and the class teacher to add to greater understanding of how self-regulation is developing and the impact of the intervention. I believe that this research will have a significant impact on numerous aspects of education and society. In terms of education and educational policy, it will be very important for developing accessible self-regulation interventions which are low cost, do not require any formal training, and can be used in schools globally. In terms of theory, it will also add to our understanding of self-regulation and research practices by using an exploratory case study design. Finally, it's going to add to society in terms of a greater understanding of autism and also responding to the United Nations call for helping to support the lifelong outcomes of autistic people in developing those higher order skills and enabling all people to access the social world. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation and thank you for listening to it. And I also hope that this research will have a positive impact on classrooms and on autistic people across the world. Thank you so much.